I'm Sean Bose, concert visual designer in Los Angeles, California. Today we're talking about a few of my favorite modifiers. Alright, so I've got a simple scene set up here, and I'm just going to show you a few of my favorite modifiers inside of Notch. As you can see, there's a ton of them under here, so this is really just a basic look at some of the modifiers that I use the most. Some of these are pretty basic, but let's take a look. So the first one is the Continuous Modifier. The Continuous Modifier outputs a value that continuously and linearly changes by a set amount in a certain direction. So you can see that there's the current value, that's the output value, the speed. Most often I'll use this for something like continuously rotating an object. So we've got our shape 3D here. Let's just pull this up to the rotation heading and hit play. It's a little slow. So let's change one of these to, say, 45 degrees. So now every second it will rotate 45 degrees. Next, let's look at the Math Modifier. The Math Modifier uses a selected waveform to modulate a value, kind of like Signal in Cinema 4D, or like an LFO in an audio program. You can choose the waveform, set your speed, and scale your amount. So you can choose your waveform, set your speed, and scale your amount. Speed is in seconds, so if you need to beat match, you can divide your BPM by 120 or by 60, and then multiply your desired value by that number. Watch my BPM tricks video for more. So let's see how this works in a basic way. Let's take a look at how this works in a basic way. So we've got our shape 3D here, and let's just add this to position Y. And you can see that the value is oscillating up and down from 1 to -1 at the bottom. That's due to our scale here. You have this checkbox to ignore sine. It will only do positive values, but that's sort of more of like a bouncing. If you want to go from 0 to 1, then you can just change your start value here to say 0.5, and then change your scale to 0.5. You can see it's just going from 0 up to 1. Speed is in seconds, so in music terms that's 120 BPM or 60 BPM. If you wanted to beat match this, you can take your desired BPM, let's say 174, divided by 120. That will give you a value in oscillations per second that's matched to that BPM. Then you can go ahead and multiply or divide that to get multiples of that. Say, have this happen only once per bar rather than once per beat. You can also choose different waveforms to get different effects. Cosine is just an inverted sine. Square wave sort of is like a hold keyframe. It just pops in between the two states. Square inverted. Interpolated noise is sort of a smooth randomness. Random noise is really crazy. You have to really slow this one down. And it's kind of square waves within that. Perlin noise is also nice. You can change it from a more smooth noise to something a little more jagged by changing the octaves. And we've got saw waves and triangle waves for more linear motion. Next modifier we're going to look at is the envelope modifier. The way I use the envelope modifier is either as a slider control or as a multiplier. Say for example we have multiple objects that we want to modify at the same time. We can take all of these cubes, plug our envelope modifier into the position, and now I have a slider control that allows me to modify each of these in unison with one control. The other way that I use the envelope modifier is to invert a value. So let's say I have this continuous modifier rotating this cube on the right. And I want this cube on the left to rotate at the same speed but in the opposite direction because symmetry. So I can bring my continuous modifier into the value port of the envelope, change my envelope scale to -1. You can see that inverts the value. And bring that into the rotation heading. And now both of these cubes are being powered by this modifier, but inverted. So now when I change this, both objects are affected. I only have to change one value. The next modifier is the range remap modifier. Range remap is like a range mapper in Cinema 4D's Espresso. It lets you take a range of input values and remap them to a new set of output values. For example, 0 to 1 could be remapped to 0 to 100, or 0 to 255, or to 360. You could even remap it from 25 to 77. This lets you take a basic input and remap it more precisely to different types of parameters. So let's see where this is useful. Let's say we wanted to use this slider control to rotate one of these cubes from 45 degrees to 60 degrees. We take this envelope, which outputs 0 to 1. We put it into our range remap input. And we change our out values from 45 to 60. Then we'll take our range remap, plug it into rotation heading. You can see the value jump to 45. If we slide this up to 1, you can see our cube rotates. It is now at 60 degrees. If we decide that's not enough, we could go in here and can change these values from 0 to 120. And now our slider control has a greater range. This is also a great way to have one modifier affect multiple different parameters. Say you have this math modifier set up just how you like it, and you want it to affect the scale of this cube, the rotation of this cube, and the position of this one. So we'll create some range remaps that go -1 to 1, which matches the output of our math modifier. And we'll say that goes, for scale, we'll go 0.5 to 1.5. For rotation, we'll go 45 to 90. And for position, we'll go 0 to 1. So now if we plug our math modifier into each one of these, plug them in to their respective values here. You can see that we have one modifier controlling multiple different objects in multiple different ways. So now, if we decide we need it to happen twice as fast, we can change one value and have full control over all of these. And if we need to, we can go in and adjust our parameters for each object still. The next modifier is the MIDI modifier. A really cool feature of Notch is the ability to have MIDI controlling the parameters of objects in your scene. Of course, you can use this for effects, VJ style, but it's also super fun for animating objects with sliders. Paired with the range remap and envelope modifiers, this can get crazy. Let's look at a basic example. I have my device selected here, and if you don't see devices here, go check under devices, audio and MIDI devices. Make sure you have one here and that it's loaded into one of these slots, and that if it's not, you may have to close down Notch, plug in your MIDI device, and reopen. And then it should appear here. So I've got a MIDI device in here, and you just click this button and move. I'm moving a slider, and you can see that it came in here. So now, instead of using the envelope modifier as my slider control, I can use a slider on a MIDI control to do a similar thing. So let's plug our MIDI modifier into our range remap from earlier. It's going 0 to 120. And let's plug that into the rotation of this cube. Now if we hit play and move the slider up and down, you can see that I'm controlling this with my slider. which is pretty cool. I actually use this for camera animation in this 12th Planet visual, where I was using different sliders on my MIDI controller to control the camera in and out, rotation, and the rotation of the Jumbotron. That way I could play along to the beat, really slam the animation on some of the bigger musical hits. The way you can do that is by checking this recording box here. Let's stop our timeline and go back. Hit recording. This will turn green. And click play, and we'll record a little bit of an animation. Then if you turn off recording and click use recorded value, when you play back, it will use those values that you recorded in like a keyframed animation. And you can actually go in and see your keyframes here in the timeline. If you need to, you can clean them up or make any modifications. The next modifier we're going to look at is the Sound Modifier. As it says in the name, this modifier lets you use sound to drive parameters a notch, similar to sound keys in After Effects. You add a sound, link it up to the modifier, and use the equalizer sliders to choose which frequencies to use. Then you can play with the attack, decay, min and max, and use smoothness to achieve the desired results. The visuals at the bottom will help you see what your value curve looks like. We add a sound, attach it to the Sound Modifier, and let's use it to control position. So we can use this EQ to choose which part of the audio spectrum we want to use to modify the value, from the bass to the high highs. You can also use this drop down slider to get some presets and choose a particular band or choose bass, mids, and treble. Let's try the bass. And then you can use these values here, the attack, decay, min and max, spikiness, scale, and smoothness to change this value graph here that's overlaid on your waveform. So let's see how this is behaving right out of the box. So you can see it's a little jaggedy and maybe a little bit too powerful right now. So we can change that and take out some of the spikiness and raise the minimum value. That will kind of simplify our curve a little bit right there. and raising the minimum value means that only for extreme bass hits will this line be affected. You can also try upping the smoothness a little bit. That will sort of round out our curve. Alright, so those are a few of my favorite modifiers. If you like this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and come back later for more videos. Thanks for watching. Peace.